Are we live yet?
And we're live.
We're live. Good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. My name is Maitreyabandhu. If you don't know me, here I am at the London Buddhist Centre. We're preparing for Dharma Day, a day retreat that we're running, an online day retreat that we're running on Sunday, which will culminate in our first ever Mitra seminars online. Mitra just means friend. So on Sunday, 10 men and women are going to publicly say they're a Buddhist, basically, in a special ritual that we're going to be doing virtually. It's the first time we've done it. So this is a course that you're all on. So welcome those of you who've been on the course. I know many of you have been meditating with either Maitreyabandhu or Bantey in the morning. Hopefully you were listening in last night to Surya Gupta. Tonight myself, and then tomorrow Enrich is going to be exploring seeing through the self, exploring the great matter of Buddhist wisdom. So these last night, tonight, and tomorrow night are all kind of explorations of wisdom. And then we'll have some special events on Saturday, and then this whole day retreat on Sunday from 8 o'clock in the morning all the way till 9 o'clock at night. So I hope you'll carry on joining us for all that. And welcome again, if you're new to the Buddhist Centre, if you're new to either me or to the Buddhist Centre or to this course, welcome to you. It's really, really great. Let's just say hello to Sanjay as well, who's our tech for tonight. I live upstairs with Sanjay, with a few others. So here is Sanjay with his lockdown hair. So welcome everyone. We'll start sort of properly in a moment, but yes, just to get yourself comfortable. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then we'll have a meditation and a tea break. Although we won't be serving tea this time, you'll need to obviously go and get your own cup of tea. Normally we're serving it next door with the obligatory biscuit, vegan biscuit, I think. But you'll need to do all that tonight. We'll have a 10-minute break, and then I'll say a bit more, and there'll be chance for questions, and we'll round off about 9 o'clock. Yeah. So hopefully people are gathering. How many have we got just at the moment?
We've got 69 people just now.
Great. So we've got 69 of you all pouring in. It's really lovely that can happen. I'm still a bit amazed by what can happen. So, welcome everyone. As I say, especially welcome if you're new. Let's hear a few places where people are from as well, just so we get a bit of a sense of the community together, gathering together.
Yeah, we've got lots of people from all over the place. Lots of people from East London, like Robert from Limehouse.
Hi there, Robert.
Dikshant from Nagpur.
Wonderful. Great. Good. Great.
Julie from Essex. Predrag from Belgrade.
So we got Belgrade, India, Essex. That's great.
Tony from Mexico.
Oh, great. We've got someone from Mexico as well. That's great. It's incredible that we can reach out to people. Hi there, Tony, all the way around the world. It's amazing to me. Yeah, that's really great. So particularly welcome to you.
Yeah, lots of other places in London as well. Camberwell, Deptford.
Great.
Charlie from Kent.
Hi there, Charlie.
Chelsea. Maria from Bournemouth.
How nice to be living in Bournemouth, Maria. I've been thinking I'd like to see the sea. Anyway.
Nathan from Glasgow.
Oh, going up to Glasgow. That's good. Hi there, Nathan. Good to see you. I always say good to see you. I actually can't see anything but this. What is it? Camcorder? What is it? This camera called? Okay, it's camera. I'm just looking at this little black camera. There's Sanjay laughing at me behind the camera. So I keep on saying, hi, nice to see you. But I'm sort of imaginatively seeing you in my mind's eye. Yeah, so welcome everyone. So I'll start in just a moment, just wait for people to gather, but just to say hello. So do say hello in the chat box. It's only recently those words chat box has entered my lexicon. I can now say chat box and Slack and all sorts of things that words I'd never heard of until lockdown, including lockdown and furlough and shielding and all these words that suddenly are part of everyone's usage. So welcome everyone. So I think we'll start just now. So yes, welcome from me, Maitreyabandhu. here I am in the main shrine room of the London Buddhist Centre. So what we're going to be doing this evening, this is part of our course called The Road to Full Potential. And what we're going to do this evening is I'm the second person to talk about wisdom. So we're using this metaphor of a road to full potential. Full potential is imagined behind us as the figure of the Buddha himself. And I'll say something about that figure this evening. And the metaphor of the road, we're actually using it as a metaphor for what's called the Threefold Way in Buddhism, which is a very famous way of teaching Buddhism, which breaks down to ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So we're doing meditation in the morning. We've had 3 talks on ethics. So ethics is a bit of a posh way of putting it. I always prefer the word in Pali is sila. I would prefer just behavior. How you behave creates the kind of person you are. And then meditation, and then wisdom. So tonight we're going to be exploring another dimension of wisdom. I hope I can get that across to you. So I'll say something, and then we're going to try and apply that reflection on wisdom in meditation. Then we'll have a cup of tea, and I'm hoping that a nice thing happens during our cup of tea, we'll see. Then we'll have a cup of tea, get yourself settled, and then I might say a little bit more, and there'll be plenty of time for questions. So as I'm talking tonight, do put your questions in the chat box. Do start to think of questions. And Sanjay will collate them all together. He's very good at that. And tell me what they are at the end. We really want to feel that this is very as interactive as possible, not just me, talking to you across the airways. Yeah. So that's the structure. And yes, this course is culminating in a day retreat on Sunday that starts at 8 o'clock in the morning and goes all the way to the evening. And we're having some very special ritual, a very special ritual in the evening, because we'll be welcoming 2 new mitras. A mitra means friend. So we're going to have these rituals, 10 people, 2 new mitras, I said. Actually, it's 10 new mitras. 10 people are going to be publicly saying they're a Buddhist and they're practicing within the Triratna Buddhist order and movement. So do come for that. When I say come, I just mean, of course, online. But yeah, it's the first time we've ever had mitra ceremonies online. We'll see how it goes. It's a bit of an experiment. Everything seems a bit of an experiment at the moment. Okay, so that's the shape of things. So I'm going to be talking about wisdom. So I'm going to talk about that a bit, and then let's try and apply it in a meditation. I'll see how far I get, and then I'll talk a bit more in the second half. I sort of wanted to start with what I don't want to talk about. Just what I don't want to talk about. So, this YouTube film, video, whatever I'm doing at the moment, it was called Facing Pain. I don't know whose title that was. It might have been mine, actually. It's called Facing Pain. But I want to just be clear that, just to clear up what I might mean by that, or whoever came up with that. So a while ago, a good few years ago now, I was in New Zealand. My partner comes from New Zealand. I was staying with him and his father and stepmother up in the northern New Zealand, wonderful place, overlooking the sea, fantastic, like a little paradise place. But we went there at quite short notice because Gary's father was dying. He had cancer. Lovely man, actually. I really liked him. I got on with him. He was dying of cancer, and we went over to see him. And I remember him saying, "Look, come sooner rather than later." As it turned out, he luckily lived a year or two longer. But anyway, we went over, and obviously, I don't need to tell you about all the agonies of that and the treatment and so on. But I remember going and thinking, what would I don't know, how could I help? Could I help? That feeling where you don't know whether you can help or not. And I decided just to sort of be as helpful and friendly and sort of positive as I could whilst I was there. And at one time, about a few days into our visit, he said to me, "Would you teach me meditation?" And I said, yeah, I'd be very, very happy to teach you meditation. So I remember leading him through a meditation, him and his wife, leading them through a meditation, with this wonderful bay outside and this wonderful garden going down to the sea. And I remember him finding it really, really helpful, really, really helpful. But the thing that he was surprised by is that I didn't offer it to him immediately. That I didn't come to the house and say, why don't I teach you Buddhism, meditation, mindfulness? That'll help. And he wasn't saying that critically. In fact, he was saying it appreciatively, that I hadn't come with a solution to his problem. It's not really a problem to sort of the wrong word in a sense, but a solution to cancer or a solution to pain. That I hadn't immediately said, oh, why didn't you try this? Why didn't you try that? He was very appreciative of that. And I remember saying to him, yes, I had thought about that, but I didn't want to come in offering you some cheery solution to something that I'm not experiencing and something, well, we know where it's going to take you. I didn't want to come with that well-meaning, cheery solution to that. I'd find that terribly patronizing. I wouldn't like anyone to do that to me. I remember, I've got this sort of ongoing problem with my guts, and I remember when I first started getting it, quite a lot of discomfort. I remember talking to somebody for a matter of moments before he was suggesting that I try past life regression therapy, which until that moment I'd never heard of. And he was trying to help and he was well-meaning, but I really didn't like some kind of cheery solution given to me by somebody who wasn't experiencing that. I was very, very happy to respond if he wanted me, but I didn't want to sort of, come up with a cheery solution. So I'm not trying to come up with a cheery solution to pain tonight. I don't believe in that. I think it's too serious a subject. It's probably one of the most serious subjects. So I'm not going to be saying, here's some handy hints, here's some tips for how you didn't need to deal with pain. Yeah? I've got my own pains, discomforts, and so on, physical and emotional and everything else, just like you have. And I'm not going to offer you some kind of fix it. Yeah, I'm not going to be doing that. Some of you might be tuning in, hoping that I'm going to be talking perhaps about chronic pain. Somebody I was talking to the other day said, you haven't got any pain. How can you be facing pain? Which is not quite true. But anyway, so you might think that I'm going to be talking about chronic pain. I'm not going to be talking about chronic pain. What I thought I would do instead is recommend Vidyamala's book called Living Well with Pain and Illness. I meant to suggest to Sanjay that he finds a link that he could put it into the chat if he can. But Vidyamala, she's an order member in the Triratna Buddhist order. I know her. I think of her as a friend, and we never meet very often, but I always really like meeting her. And she's got really solid, good sense. She doesn't give you cheery solutions, but she can help you. So if you are somebody, who suffers chronic pain, I'd really recommend this book. It's called Living Well with Pain and Illness, and I'll get Sanjay to pop that in the chat just now. But I won't be talking about that either. So just going through my list of what I won't be talking about. What I want to focus on is the wisdom approach to pain, and I'll come to that in a moment. If we were to look, before we get to a wisdom perspective, and one of the things we're going to have to get right this evening is, what perspective are we taking on something? You'll find that the wisdom perspective on pain and suffering is radically different from a more pragmatic approach. Yeah? Not more pragmatic, but it's radically different from a well-being approach. Yeah? And you might not even quite like it, or you might find, if it's not careful, you'll get confused by it because it's a different level. So we'll be coming to a different level of approach to suffering in a moment. I thought before we did that, I'd just say a little bit at our level, here and now, just to give you some things. There's so many people who've spoken about pain and suffering. I'm not sure I can add very much to it. I mean, the thing that I've been struck with about pain, and my own and other people's, is that the key to working with pain in everyday consciousness before one starts to bring in wisdom reflection, is the fact that pain feels threatening. You feel very threatened by pain, whether it's the pain of somebody talking loudly on their mobile next to you on the bus, not that anybody can be doing that now because they can't sit next to you, or the pain of a bad knee, or pain of a bad back, or the pain of worrying about COVID, and people are coming out of lockdown and some people don't seem to be following the procedures, and will there be another spike? That's another sort of pain as well. Yeah? So what we need to tune into in ordinary experience is the sense of it being threatened by pain. That's the thing to notice, that pain threatens us. So when we're working with day-to-day pain, what you're trying to do is work with that sense of threat, that you're being threatened. Because when you feel threatened to something, you stick to it, don't you? You get more and more bound up with a sense of threat, and that increases the pain. Yeah. So one of the experiences I've had of that, actually quite strongly, was get tinnitus. I have tinnitus, and it's mostly fine in the city because there's lots of background noise. When I go on a solitary retreat, especially if I go somewhere a long, long way away, and it's not windy and there's no background noise, I can hear it quite well. And when you're on a solitary retreat, when you're on your own for a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever, Jan of Archer was on his own for 6 months. He might mention that tomorrow night. You really notice it, and there's nothing to distract you. You've not got your computer, you've not got your phone. And I had this time on this solitary retreat where, just really, really starting to hook on to the tinnitus, and then thinking, will it keep me awake? What happens if it keeps on? It's going to drive me mad. Then you start listening for it. Oh, it seems to have gone. That's good. Oh no, it's there still. So do you see how I was starting to see tinnitus as a threat and relate to it like that? And you start to look out for it. You start to, is it there? And that makes it much worse. So one of the things you can say, I think, usefully about pain is it's really easy to make it worse. Yeah? It's really easy to respond to pain in a way that creates more pain. And that's linked with this sense of threat. So if someone says something unpleasant to you and you respond immediately with the kind of trigger reaction, whether it's aggression, I'm more likely to kind of crumple in those. If someone's unpleasant to me, I tend to sort of crumple rather than be aggressive. I tend to sort of turn inward, which is still a reaction. So if you react to pain, very often you make your pain and very often other people's pain worse. Yeah? So that's one of the things to remember, I think, generally with pain, whether it's emotional pain, social pain, feeling that people don't like you, feeling that you're not welcome, any kind of threat, is if you latch onto it, you ease it. And the issue to look at is that sense of being threatened by pain. Yeah? So one writer on chronic pain, she says that, and I was really struck by this, she says that if you've got chronic pain, you need to honor the pain, you need to feel it, you need to turn towards it, you need to work on letting go of being threatened by it. You need to turn towards it, feel it, without getting into catastrophic narratives, without thinking, when will it end, will it get worse, which are very, very tempting to do. My experience of pain is it sends you into this mass of thought. Will it get worse? Oh, can I bear it? Oh no, it's already, is it going to go? It's come back, yeah? So you need to honor your pain, she says. And then you're trying to, she says you need to do that. You need to turn towards it. You need to work with that sense of threat. You need to even welcome it so that you start to turn off that sense of threat. Easier said than done. As I've been saying recently, a lot of things are easier said than done. In fact, almost everything is easier said than done. And then the other thing she said is, you need to honor your pain. But then the other thing she said that I was really struck by is she said that you need to exponentially enrich your life. Yeah? You need to exponentially enrich your life. So she said that if dealing with pain is one of 5 or 10 things in your life, you're going to get into trouble. It needs to be one of 20 things. It needs to be one of 30 things. You need to exponentially enrich your life. You need to find more and more in your life that is enriching. Now, that's quite a tough call for somebody that's in chronic pain, but I was really struck by it. People who are in chronic pain, they have to have that discipline. They need to honor their pain. A friend of mine was telling me about an elderly woman friend of his that she used to allow herself 5 minutes to talk about her pain, and then she'd say, "That's it, that's all, time up." And she'd do that with her friends. "Okay, that's all you can talk about. You know it's not going to make it any worse. Let's get on to something else." Yeah. You know, if you carry on talking about it, you'll focus on it more. Difficult because you don't want to be exponentially enriching your life in order to get away from pain or get rid of it. That's not what she means. She means honoring your pain first and then exponentially enriching your life. I thought it was a wonderful point. And you don't need to have chronic pain. We, all of us, in a certain poetic sense at least, minor sense, have a kind of chronic pain. We all have our pains and distresses. So we need to honor that and turn towards it and feel it and be brave enough to feel it, not try to ignore it, avoid it, and so on. And we need to exponentially enrich our life. Yeah. So there's a lot more to say about that, but that's all I want to say from a sort of everyday point of view. How do you work with your pain? And you can see that in so many books, not only Buddhist books, but lots of other books trying to help us very usefully work with pain and chronic pain and distress and so on. So I'm going to be talking tonight about the Buddhist vision of pain, the Buddhist vision of suffering. Yeah. Just another caveat before I do that, which is when we do this, when I do this, I'd like myself and I'd like you watching just now in your lounge, on your sofa with your cup of tea or wherever you are, on your laptop, on your phone, let's be really careful not to dignify suffering. Yeah? Very, very tempting to dignify suffering. I'm not trying to say that suffering is a good thing, that there's value in suffering, it's really good to suffer. I think one has to be very, very cautious about that sort of language. If you're not careful, if you dignify it, if you identify with it or over-identify with it, you'll end up again with more pain. There's enough pain anyway in life without over-identifying it or dignifying it, sort of saying that there's something kind of spiritual about pain. Sometimes people even think that Buddhism is saying that life is pain or life is suffering. Buddhism's not saying that. It's saying something much more subtle than that, much more profound than that. Yeah? So let's not dignify suffering. Let's not, I don't know, call it grand names and say we need to, the spiritual value in it. There can be value in it, and even spiritual value in it, but not in that sense of pain is good. The spiritual value of pain, you could say from an ordinary perspective, a day-to-day perspective, the spiritual value of pain is simply one thing, that it makes you reflect. Yeah? Whether it's emotional pain, so much of our pain nowadays is really social pain to do with comparing yourself with others, feeling inferior to some people, feeling superior to others, feeling the same as others. Those kind of comparison games that we're all caught up in, those sort of social games. Do they love me? Do they like me? Am I popular? Am I intelligent? Well, how come I'm not as good as this person? A lot of our pain is actually social pain. But the value of pain from a spiritual point of view is it makes you reflect. Yeah, it means that you stop and reflect. If you're happy and having a great time, good for you. That's great. But you don't tend to think then. You don't tend to reflect then. You tend to absolutely not want to think and reflect. Yeah? So that the spiritual value of pain and suffering isn't so much in the suffering itself. It's in the fact that it draws you up short. It's in the fact that you start to ask deeper questions of your life. I hope you do anyway. Very often, the reason people come to the London Buddhist Centre, when people could come to the London Buddhist Centre, and soon we're hoping that some people can come back, not very many, but we're hoping that some people can. But often the reason that people come to the London Buddhist Centre is because of some kind of pain in their life, some kind of suffering in their life that's drawn them short, that's drawn them up, that's stopped them in their tracks, that's made them ask deeper questions. A sexual relationship breaking down, the death of a parent or a loved one, a loss of a job. And I know that some of my friends have been experiencing that in this whole lockdown. It's often at those moments that people turn to something like Buddhism or meditation. Okay, so those are my reflections on ordinary consciousness. So you could wrap all that up by saying, quite simply, that the Buddhist aim of the everyday aim, the day-to-day aim of Buddhism and pain is, let's have you there watching me and me here talking into the camera. Let's have as little pain as possible. Yeah, let's have as little pain as possible. Let's have as little suffering as possible. Now, we all want that. You don't need me, and you don't need 2,500 years of Buddhism to tell you that, or say that let's have as little pain as possible. But that's what we all want. We don't want to suffer. I don't want to suffer. In my best moments, in my good moments, I don't want you to suffer. And you're the same. We're all the same in that way. Whatever race, nationality, creed, gender, we're all more the same than we are different. We don't want to suffer. Even though we don't want to suffer, we often cause ourselves suffering. Very often we cause each other suffering. Often out of foolishness rather than hatred. I very rarely meet people who want to inflict suffering. I've met one or two people who I think have a sort of malevolent streak, but it's very rare. Most of our suffering is blundering suffering, causing ourselves and causing others, reacting habitually out of unawareness. So let's have as little pain and suffering as possible. That's the aim on an ordinary day-to-day way. The big matter is, how do you do that? How do you get as little pain and suffering as possible? Because if you react to pain with hatred, righteous indignation, pontificating, self-pity, distracting yourself, we've all got strategies to avoid discomfort. Many of those strategies actually create more discomfort. Yeah. So how do we have in our life as little pain and suffering as possible? And that's mostly for us the wisdom that we're trying to learn. That, I remember taking up smoking because I was heartbroken, as it were. I started smoking for a short period of time. And you smoke not because you think this is good for me, it isn't, good for my lungs and so on. You just get a moment of pleasure, don't you? You remember that when you first light a cigarette, you get that funny giddy moment, and then for a moment that takes the pain away for a second. And I remember I started smoking. Before I knew it, smoking one cigarette, and then two cigarettes, and three cigarettes. And before I knew it, anything that was slightly just uncomfortable, I'd want a cigarette. Yeah. But when you do that it's not in your interest, but it's a short-term attempt to manage suffering. Yeah. So that it's not actually in the longer term, even in the shorter term, going to help you have as little pain and suffering as possible, but your actions are unwise. Yeah. So from a simple point of view, the wisdom attitude to pain is, let's have as little pain and suffering as possible. But the great question, the koan almost, is how are we going to do that? And that means being really honest with yourself. Gosh, this state of mind I'm in now is suffering. When I get into this state, I'm in suffering. And very often I'm actually vibing that out, at the very least, to others, or often enough sharing that with others, passing it on. We pass around suffering like pass the parcel sometimes. I blame you, Sanjay blames so-and-so, somebody kicks a cat. Yeah. That's the first thing I want to say. So what I thought we'd do just now is, let's, rather than me talk more and try and move into a wisdom perspective, I thought what we'd do is we'd do a short meditation to start to actually discover a wisdom perspective to pain and suffering. Then I'll say a bit about pain and suffering, and then we'll have a short break, and then I'll say some more about this wisdom approach to suffering. So let's set up to meditate. So you might want to dim the screen of your laptop or your computer or your phone. We're going to turn the lights down here. If you're sitting in a chair, see if you can just sit. Just sit with your feet on the floor. Yeah, as best as you can. try and be supported and upright. We're only going to be meditating just now for 10 minutes. We'll do a bit more later on. And then when you're ready, closing your eyes. With your eyes closed, really see if you can feel the weight of your body on the cushions, on the chair. You don't need to think about that. You don't need to imagine that. You can just feel your body supported. And then softening your eyes and your brow. And your jaw. And see if you can tell if you're gripping in your shoulders. And we're often doing that automatically, habitually. So see if you can feel any tightness, soreness. In your shoulders. And just imagine your shoulders letting go. And similarly, see if you can tell if you're gripping in your belly. We're often doing that. And we don't notice that we're doing that, we're doing it habitually. So see if you can let it go. And then again, noticing your thighs. And we're very often grasping with our thighs, kind of gripping with our thighs. Just see if you can let that go as well. So you're looking for any tightening and gripping and holding in your body. And these tightenings and grippings and holdings become very habitual. They're automatic. We don't do them consciously. They're very often, even mostly often there. So see if you can let go of any grasping, of any gripping. So a good place to look is your jaw. Are you gripping with your jaw? Are you holding on in your shoulders? Or your belly? So you can just imagine your body letting go. Letting go of any grasping, gripping, tightening, holding. And then coming back to the weight of your body on the floor. your feet on the floor, your backside on the chair. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes. Okay, good. So as the evening progresses, we'll come back to meditation, I hope, and I'll say a little bit about that approach and I'll take it a bit further, hopefully. See how the time goes. So let's now start to really explore this wisdom perspective. So when in Buddhism we talk about pain and suffering, we're talking about dukkha. So that's the Pali word dukkha. Dukkha includes pain, as we usually talk about, like physical pain. In fact, that's oddly called dukkha, the pain of having pain. But what Buddhism means by, what the Buddha meant by dukkha goes much deeper than that. Dukkha includes pain, but it goes much deeper than that. So the word dukkha basically comes from, the metaphor usually uses an ill-fitting wheel on a carriage. So you're on this carriage, on a cart, and a wheel has been fitted incorrectly. So it's smooth for a moment and it bumps, and it's smooth for a moment and it bumps. So Buddhism is saying that life has got dukkha all the way through it. Ordinary life, everyday life, what you would call everyday consciousness, because we're going to go beyond that in a way, but has got this sense of dukkha all the way through it. I actually prefer the Zen idea of this, which is the metaphor of a man on a lumpy mattress. That's a really brilliant image for dukkha. So you have to imagine this man on a lumpy mattress, or woman, or whoever on a lumpy mattress, and it's lumpy. So a spring starts to poke into them, and it gets uncomfortable. So they then turn over. And as soon as they've turned over, oh, that's nice. I feel comfortable again. That's nice. It's not pushing into me anymore. And then another spring starts to push into them and makes them feel uncomfortable. So they turn over again. Oh, that's better. You feel better. And then discomfort comes again. So do you see how there's a wonderful description of what our human life is like? It's not saying life is pain. It's saying life is like being a man on a lumpy mattress. We've got this, there's basically a discomfort. We can move and then we make it better for a bit and we feel that we haven't got pain or suffering. And then it comes back again. There's so many different ways of talking about dukkha. I won't be able to go into it all this evening. There's too much to say. But dukkha is usually translated as that sense of unsatisfactoriness, of incompleteness even. There's something always a bit wrong, that things don't ever quite work. Or if they work, they don't work for very long. And even when they work, you know that they're going to stop working because things are going to change. Even your happiest moment, you know that it's not going to last. So dukkha is this sense of unsatisfactoriness, that life is shot through with unsatisfactoriness. I don't know, even to the trivial thing, like you think, oh, I'm going to have this lovely time in a cafe, not that you could do that just now, but you go and try and find the nice cake, the nice coffee, sit with a nice view, and then, as soon as you've got it all set up and there's your view, you need to go to the loo, then you go down to the loo, and then you got up and the coffee's not so hot anymore and the sun's gone in a bit. It's like, Dukkha is saying that life is like trying to get a balloon into a cardboard box. There's always a bit of Dukkha that pokes out. You get this bit right and that bit right, but then a bit pokes out and it makes you feel uncomfortable. That would be another way. A friend of mine once translated Dukkha as being that life is annoying, which I actually thought was rather good, that there's always something a bit annoying. You go on a holiday in a lifetime, there's always something a bit annoying. Of course, if you're in a tricky mental state, things can seem annoying very easily. So Dukkha is that sense of unfulfillment, of incompleteness, of unsatisfactoriness, of life never quite feeling right. And sometimes you can feel like I've got it, but other people haven't got it. Other people look like they're cheery, especially if you look on Facebook, everyone grins into the camera on Facebook or on Instagram. Everyone else seems to be having a great life. And you can feel this sense of, I don't know, I sometimes feel this sense of unreality to myself, or like I'm not real quite, or I'm not a proper person, or I'm not fully confident, or why can't I be more like this person or that person? So often we sort of give it psychological meanings, and I'm not denying psychological suffering. What I'm trying to get to now is that looking at life from a wisdom perspective, not a psychological perspective, although it probably includes that. So Dukkha is trying to say human life as we experience it, which is not how the Buddha experiences, and I'll come back to that in the second half. Human life as we experience it, you and I, Sanjay and I, and you, unless you're enlightened on this call, not a call, on this video, how we experience it is a bit annoying, or even like, and that goes from all the way to a bit annoying to being unbearable. Yeah. So if you're sitting there just now, you might already be thinking, God, how long is this going to go on for? I wish I'd watched a film. I should have gone on Netflix. I might go on. What I might do is I'll listen to it until the tea break. Then I go on Netflix. And then you go on Netflix and you think, actually, this is a bit boring. I might go back to that Buddhist guy. Or, you might be feeling comfortable, but there's something a bit uncomfortable, there's something preying on your mind. Or just simply that you think, I'm uncomfortable now, but soon I'm going to have some chocolate. We have this sense of, yes, there's discomfort now. Most people, if you say, look, in this very moment, is there dukkha? Is there a sense of unsatisfactoriness or incompleteness or even pain, discomfort? Is there one now? And you might say, yes, but soon there's lunch. Or soon I'm going to buy something on Amazon. Or soon that package from Amazon is going to arrive with I recently bought a bedside lamp, which I ended waiting for 2 months to arrive. And I ended up with this weird sense that once that bedside lamp appears, my life would be strangely transformed. It hasn't been strangely transformed. I had a moment of pleasure when I finally put it together and lit my book up to read, and then that's it. Yeah. But you see how what we do, we think, yeah, there's discomfort, and I don't know, I don't feel quite right. I don't feel like I've got something. I don't feel quite complete. I don't feel like things are quite running smoothly. But when the lamp appears, now you don't literally think like that. Nobody thinks all my pain and suffering will be solved when I get lunch, when I get chocolate, when I get sex, when I get that text back from the girl or boy or whoever, when I get that promotion. Nobody really thinks that's going to solve my life. I'm never going to have pain again. But if you look honestly at yourself, that is largely what we're doing. That we're a bit uncomfortable now, but don't worry, because soon we're going to have lunch. Or don't worry, soon we're going to get to sleep with somebody. Or don't worry, tonight, a little bit later on, just now, we're going to go and look at Netflix or something a bit. You see what I mean? That's what we all do. It's very, very difficult to face the fact that, golly, all of my life, I've got this sort of, it might not be terribly strong, but sense of, and it can be something like simply, is that it? I got this, I got that, but I still don't feel complete. I still don't feel like I can sort of live life to the core. It's like there's a bit of grit anywhere. Your dukkha is a bit like sand on a beach holiday, it gets everywhere. It gets in your sandwiches, it gets in your knickers. You come home and it's still in your turnips. Even if you're on this lovely holiday, you've got sand in your sandwiches. That's basically what Buddhism is saying about dukkha, that to our unenlightened consciousness, to yours and mine, and I've got an unenlightened consciousness, there's always a sense of slight wrongness, of skewedness, of incompleteness, of being like a man on a lumpy mattress that's uncomfortable, then I turn over, then I feel comfortable for a minute, then I get uncomfortable again, I turn over, and so I go on. And it's so easy just to live like that forever, to never really address that. And of course, one of the ways of not ever addressing that is drinking, taking drugs, obsessive socializing, addictive television watching. What a lot of our actions are about are distracting ourselves, sometimes useful actually, let's not distraction too much, but trying to get away from that my experience is a bit uncomfortable. And we hope, sometimes with a foolish hopefulness, that lunch, a surprise, a lover, a car will actually take all of that suffering away. So that's the first thing to say about dukkha, that it's not, Buddhism isn't saying that pain is life. It's saying that life is shot through with this sense of dissatisfaction, unease, a sense of never quite settling, this sense of sand on a beach holiday. Yeah. But it's not saying that's not a comment about reality. And I'll come on to this in the second half. That's not a comment about reality. That's a comment about you and me. Yeah, it's a comment about you. It's a comment about me. It's not saying, the Buddha isn't saying life is suffering. She's actually not saying anything about reality. And we're going to come to reality, I hope, in the second half. He's saying the way you interact with reality, the way I interact with reality, is causing dukkha. Yeah, is actually causing us to suffer, us to feel unsatisfied, unfulfilled, and so on. Yeah. Very, very important thing. Some people think that Buddhism is somehow saying that life, reality itself, is basically suffering. That is not a Buddhist teaching. You can't say anything about reality itself. I'll come on to this in the second half. You can't say anything about reality itself. All you can say, all you can do is clear the things away that obstruct reality from you. Reality itself is beyond all conceptualization. It's beyond the physical senses and the rational mind. So dukkha, this sense of dissatisfaction, is not to do with reality. It's to do with our relationship to our experience. It's not even really to do with experience itself, whatever strange word I find, experience. A lot of people say my experience. What they really mean is my reading of experience, my judgment of experience. To get to experience, whatever that means, is very, very profound. What we usually mean is that's how I interpret what I experience. So let's have a break just now, just for a few minutes. And then after the break, I'm going to talk much more about reality, hopefully, and how reflecting on dukkha is a gateway to reality, opens you up to reality, a reality that's impossible for me or anybody else to ever describe. Yeah? But you don't need me to describe it. What you need is a gateway to open you up to it. And we'll come back to that in the second half in about eight or so minutes' time. Yeah. That's great. Thank you very much, David. That's really, really lovely. Did me the world of good. That's really great. Thank you very much. Very, very lovely. Actually, all of these videos are just a pretext so that David will play or Matt will come and play. We have to do some teaching stuff, and then we let's have a tea break and let's get David. That's really lovely. Thank you. Okay, so let's see if we can explore a little bit more deeply about Dukkha. I've said what Dukkha is and so on. So I hope it was a bit of a cliffhanger. I was trying to leave us on this cliffhanger that Dukkha is to do with our relationship to experience, not to experience itself. Yeah, it's to do with our relationship to experience, not to experience itself. Things in themselves are not inherently problematic. Yeah, I know that's it. You see how it's really, you have to be really careful here, because if you're not careful, it starts to look like I'm denying suffering and pain and the very real sufferings in the world. So remember, I'm taking a wisdom perspective, and a wisdom perspective in the Buddhist tradition is assuming that you've really been practicing ethics, or you've been looking at your behavior. So your behavior is non-violent, really. Your behavior is an expression of courage, loving kindness, honesty, generosity. That's the assumption behind any reflection on wisdom. And then also that you're meditating. In other words, you're cultivating awareness. Yeah? So we're not trying to get around those issues when we say things like dukkha is to do with our relationship to experience, not experience itself. But from a wisdom perspective, things are not inherently problematic. Yeah? Reality itself is ungraspable. One expression of this is nirvana alone is peace. Yeah, it's a famous sort of tag. Nirvana alone is peace. So the figure behind me is an image of Nirvana, not the 80s pop group. Was it an 80s pop group? 90s pop group? 90s pop group. But Nirvana means, it actually literally means, rather unfortunately, snuffing out, but by which it means snuffing out dukkha. Nirvana means a state of transcendental consciousness, which we all have an affinity with. It gets more and more difficult to talk about, but we all have an affinity with. So reality in itself is ungraspable. It's never captured by words. So you can't say reality is self. You can't say reality really is non-self. That's creeping in a bit. People are using non-self and effectively in a metaphysical way. There is no metaphysics for reality. Reality is beyond the sphere of reason, beyond the sphere of words. Yeah? It goes beyond the physical senses and the rational mind. And in that state of consciousness, dukkha, there's no dukkha. Yeah? Because reality is ungraspable. Dukkha is to do with your experience of your relationship to your experience. So the sense of problem, the sense of wrongness, the sense of things being annoying is not to do with reality. The sense of incompleteness is not to do with reality. It's actually telling us that we're out of kilter with reality. You could almost think of dukkha as being what happens the more out of kilter we get with reality. Yeah? The more you're not living in accordance with reality, the more dukkha you have. Yeah? And that gets more and more painful. So the more you really think, for instance, I don't know, to take a dreadful example, that you can hate people, the more you think that's fine, the more you will suffer and cause suffering, because that's out of alignment with how things really are. Yeah? The more out of alignment you get with how things really are, from a classic Buddhist perspective, the more you suffer. Yeah? The more in alignment with things as you are, generally speaking, of course, these things, you're talking different levels at the same time, you'll get less suffering. So what is the cause of dukkha? If dukkha isn't to do with reality, the Buddha is not saying that all things are dukkha. He's saying all things from an unenlightened point of view, an everyday point of view, are shot through with dukkha, inescapably linked with dukkha, like a man on a lumpy mattress. All things are like that if you're not enlightened. Yeah? It's not saying that in some kind of metaphysical sense that all things are dukkha. So what is the cause of dukkha? So the cause of dukkha, from a classic Buddhist exegesis, is the cause of dukkha is craving. Yeah? The cause of dukkha, the reason why things feel problematic, is to do with our grasping, is to do with our clinging, is to do with our craving. Yeah? And it's that creates the sense of problem. So the sense of problem that we experience in life is not to do really with our experience, it's to do with our attitude to our experience. It's to do with our relationship to our experience. And our relationship to our experience is problematized by craving, grasping, attachment, clinging. Yeah. Are you with me so far? Is everyone with me so far? Sanjay is nodding. I hope you're all nodding on the chat box. There should be a nod emoji that we can say. I don't know whether there is. So that sense of problem is showing you and showing me that we're grasping, that we're clinging, that we're attached. Yeah. So let's just be a bit clearer about what I mean by craving. So we're trying to realize that the dukkha that we have is actually showing us that we're grasping and clinging and craving to experience. Yeah, we're doing that not because that's somehow in itself a good thing. That, oh, look how much I'm craving on. We're not trying to give ourselves a kind of hard time. Oh, look at me! I just want another cake. I want more sex. I want another promotion. I want more children, whatever it is. What that wanting is showing is that's what's causing the problem. That sense of wanting. But we're not trying to just acknowledge that as a kind of stoical way. We're trying to experience a transcendental consciousness, as you see embodied behind me. We're trying to experience that because we can only experience that if we let go of craving, attachment, and grasping. Little story about that. I remember a very long time ago, I was doing a newcomer's meditation course, and this young guy, was describing an experience he'd had on a hiking holiday. And it stayed with me all this time. It must be, nearly 30 years ago that he told me. He's on this hiking holiday, really heavy kit bag, really, really weighed down, carrying his tent and all his stuff. And he'd gone it was going to be a lovely holiday. It's going to be beautiful. He's going to do this great big long walk, camping. I don't know where he was, but somewhere beautiful. Actually, what happened is it rained all the time. And he said day in and day out, it just rained. He got wetter and wetter. He'd have his tent, he started to get all of his stuff getting wet. And he said he just felt thoroughly miserable. All of this pain, suffering. So the holiday he wanted to have, he wasn't enjoying. He was really cold. He was miserable. Another day when it's rain, what it's like when it's holiday, when you wake up in the morning, ever hopeful that today it will be sunny. I've had this. I used to have holidays in Cornwall, and he used to do that. Today it will be sunny, and it's not, and that awful sinking feeling. Anyway, he had that many times more. And he said he was standing on the top of this sort of steep incline with his kit on, feeling really miserable, and he slipped. And he slipped back, and he fell onto this muddy incline. His pack was so heavy he couldn't stop himself. It was very, very muddy. He was trying to stop himself with his feet, but he couldn't stop himself. At the bottom of this incline was a big kind of puddle, but not a puddle like a pond, effectively, of filthy, muddy water. Meanwhile, it's pouring with rain. He said he slipped down on his back, and he was desperately trying to stop himself slip into this pond right at the bottom of it. And he said that he just couldn't stop it. And he said he just sank into this pond, and the water of this freezing cold muddy pond was coming up. Luckily, it came up to about here. And he said he just thought, I give up. I give up. I give up. I give up. And he did, for a moment, give up. And he said, as soon as he did that, and we often say, I give up, but we don't really mean it. We mean, we're just moaning. But in this moment, he said, he just had a moment where he just thought, it's just never going to work. I was trying to get my tent right. I was trying to make sure I didn't get wet. I was trying to and the whole thing is never going to work. And he said, for a moment, I just gave up on everything. And in that moment, he said, everything was like incredibly beautiful. There he was, up to cold water, up to here, pouring rain, mud all around him. And he just said, all I experienced was beauty. Everywhere I looked, everything. He said he felt full of rapture and beauty. And it was that experience that had brought him to exploring Buddhism. I never know, I don't think I ever met him again, which goes to show you can have these visionary experiences. It's basically a kind of insight experience, it's a minor insight experience. And you can lose them, and you can be lost. They can be lost to you, and to me, and to anyone. But yeah, I remember that story so clearly that when he gave up, all there was beauty. There wasn't a problem. There was beauty. And you see how that is a experience of wisdom. It's an experience of what's sometimes called insight. Perhaps not with a capital A, I, because insight can change you altogether. It's a visionary experience. It's a glimpse of reality as it really is, without our problematic relationship to experience, without our grasping and clinging and wanting. Yeah? And when you have a taste of that, it's supremely valuable. Buddhism, again and again, is coming up with more and more metaphors for what that's like. We've been exploring parables recently from the White Lotus Sutra. And again, it's a parable about riches, that you've gone from a state of poverty to this incredible, infinite riches. It's often this transcendental consciousness of the Buddha, this insight, this wisdom is often compared to suddenly becoming fabulously wealthy. The Bodhisattva figures, these are sort of mythical spiritual beings that are often covered with jewels and silks and fine clothes. And it's a symbol of their inner wealth. Yeah? So the reason we're trying to look at dukkha is not because suffering is good, not because we need to learn through suffering, not because there's no pain and no gain, but because there's a consciousness which, if we can let go of our clinging and grasping and wanting and hankering, there's a consciousness in which there is no problem. And if you had to use a word to describe it, one word you might use would be beautiful. That it's endlessly beautiful. Or another word is peace. And nirvana alone is peace. There's no pushing and pulling anymore. There's just peace. But let me say a little bit more, and then I'll give some time for questions. Just so we're a bit clear about what we mean by grasping, clinging, hankering, wanting. So easy to kind of get that a bit wrong. So how do you know that grasping is present? Yeah. So you know that grasping or wanting is present because you'll be preoccupied with something. Going over something again in your mind. Why hasn't she texted me back? Why doesn't he love me? How come I always get overlooked for promotion? You'll be preoccupied with something. You might be preoccupied with sex or money or status. You might be, that would be one way. Or you've got thoughts of wanting to have or wanting to get rid of something. Yeah. Or you've got thoughts of wanting to have something, sex, status, a new hairdo, clothes, whatever it is, or you want to get rid of something. Yeah, you want to be rid of something. My own teacher, Sangharakshita, the founder of this movement, he says that we basically grasp. We basically get attached to three things. We get attached to objects, by which he means things like houses, flats, cars, etc., objects. We get attached to people, and we get attached to ideas, which is very interesting. Our attachment to craving, clinging, almost addictive attachment that we have actually is also, and very importantly, to ideas. This is why Buddhism is a kind of a non-ideology. It's not even an ism. It's a shame we've got this word Buddhism. It sounds like Marxism or feminism or whatever. It's not an idea. It makes it sound like an ideology. Buddhism is very, very wary of any kind of ideology, because ideologies are things that you grasp. They're something you attach yourself to, that you create a self out of your ideologies, out of your ideas. And Sangha actually said that of all the things we get attached to, the thing we get most deeply attached to, interestingly, is our ideas. Thoughts to have or be rid of something. So what you've got in grasping is, I think it's best to think of it like that, grasping. So you've got this experience of grasping experience. But of course, when you grasp something, what you're showing to the world is a fist. So what often you see is not grasping, but it's opposite, which is hatred. Usually in Buddhist thought, hatred is an expression of frustrated grasping. But it doesn't really matter which way around you put it. I think it's best to think of craving aversion, hyphenated. As soon as you want something, you don't want something else. As soon as you're going to get something, you're in danger of losing it. So often what we're working with is not the experience of hankering, it's the experience of aversion. So what dukkha comes to mean, and what craving comes to mean, is what dukkha comes to mean. And remember, dukkha is caused by craving, hankering, and that craving, hankering is like that fist, which is grasping something and shaking a fist at the same time. It's aversion on one side, and it's holding something you want on the other. What you end up with is this infinite push and pull that we're all involved in, wanting this, not that, wanting a bit of that, wanting to avoid pain, wanting to get at pleasure. Most of the time, from a wisdom perspective, that's what we're doing. We're trying to get pleasure and we're trying to avoid pain. And we're involved in this endless, exhausting push and pull. So when that guy, rattled down that muddy slope into the pond and let go, he let go of wanting it not to rain, wanting to have a lovely time, not to be wet, not to be cold. He let go of wanting good things. He let go of not wanting bad things. And when he did that, even in the moment he did that, peace arose from within. Beauty was experienced. Yeah. Now, this is a tough call, but you see that this is a wisdom reflection. So I'm not saying something on another level. I'm talking at this wisdom level. It's really important not to get these levels mixed up. An everyday level about how you work with pain and suffering, and a wisdom perspective. Yeah. Let's not get those mixed up. What we tend to do from a wisdom perspective is we pick up phenomena, as it were, ideas, thoughts, ideologies, objects, our relationship with people, and we want them, we crave after them, we fuss over them, we worry them like a dog with a bone, or we try and get rid of them. Yeah? And that is what's causing dukkha. Yeah? That's what's causing dukkha. When you get any insight into that, and it needs to be a meditative insight, it's not just a head insight. Actually, you need to study Buddhism, I think, quite a lot to really understand these key terms, dukkha and craving and so on. They're so easily bandied around, and it's so difficult to really get a clear sense of what they mean. And then even more importantly, how do I work with it in my experience? Tomorrow morning, Vantes is going to start bringing this into the meditation for those of you doing regular meditation. But the most important thing from a wisdom perspective, well, you've got two things, haven't you? And day-to-day life, it's what I said at the start, let's have as little pain as possible. Let's absolutely have as little pain as possible. Let's cause as little pain as possible and as suffering as possible. But when you're truthful about that, you see how hard that is. Because, even that sense of, I need to really look after myself. I've seen this quite a lot, particularly with some of my young friends, a kind of preciousness, a kind of self-pampering, a kind of worrying over, I feel a bit uneasy. I need to do a bit more yoga. I need to do this. If you're not careful, that preciousness about, I don't want to have pain, actually causes pain. So the day-to-day wisdom is, how do I have as little pain as possible? How do I cause as little pain as possible? That needs a day-to-day wisdom. A meditative wisdom is about trying to see through your dukkha and see that you're grasping. When I say you, I mean me. I mean all of us. I mean Sanjay. We're grasping. I'm not picking on Sanjay. It's just the only person actually in front of me. We're grasping at discomfort. We're grasping after pleasure, and that pleasure literally can be lunch in an hour's time, or the coffee that I go downstairs to get at 11 o'clock sometimes. It can be anything, or we're trying to push away pain. And when we're involved in that, to the degree that we're involved in that, we experience dukkha. And all of that gets in the way of this state of mind. This nirvana alone is peace. Yeah? Now, I could say much, much more about that, and I've only really skimmed, the very top of this subject, this great matter of dukkha. I mean, you could say, let's start having some questions now, but you could say, the first thing to do is be really honest with yourself about that. Is it true or not? Don't take my word for it. Don't take the Buddha's word for it. Is it true or not? Yeah? But let's see if we can open it up to questions. I don't know whether we've got any questions yet, but.
Yeah. So Isaac is asking, he's saying about how one of the biggest reasons he's here is that he's grasping at his unrealized potential. He's wondering if you could help bring some reflections on that.
What do you mean by grasping at your unrealized potential? Don't quite know. Why don't you have a bit of a think about that, Isaac? Well, I'll say what I think you might mean, but you might not mean what I'm saying. So some people say to me, "What about grasping after enlightenment?" I've heard that. Or what about? I'm grasping after enlightenment. I'm grasping after. I keep wanting to go on retreat. Good on you is my answer to that. If that's what you're grasping, and if that's an issue for you, that's great. Yeah, that's great. It will get in your way, without doubt, but it will, let's say you're grasping after enlightenment. You really just want to completely fulfill your potential. And you're grasping it in such a way that you're meditating every day, you're practicing ethics, you're going on retreat. That grasping will definitely have to be let go of, but meanwhile, it's doing really good things. It's getting you on retreat. It's getting you out of the pub. It's getting you onto the meditation cushions. It's getting you being generous. That's not a problem. It will become a problem at one point, but it'll be a problem that you'll really want to have. Yeah? It will become an issue at one point, but for most of us, that's not really the issue. In a certain sense, what you're trying to do is move to having more of that issue. That actually you would rather have, deep meditation experiences, fulfilling friendship, deep communication, experiences of beauty and peace. You'd rather have that than, getting drunk and watching pornography, shopping all the time, etc. You're trying to move from wanting things that actually don't get you anywhere, scrolling through Instagram, to wanting things that do get you somewhere, to not wanting anything, even things that do get you somewhere. But you see that the first thing needs to be wanting things that actually get you somewhere. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. And yes, eventually you'll need to let go of it.
And Walter was asking about what's wrong with kind of wanting a house or a wife or children, and is wanting always wrong?
Yeah, such a good. Sorry, what was the name? Walter. Yeah, such a good question, Walter. That's so often what people say. What's wrong with wanting a house, a partner, a car? And the answer is nothing really. You're not trying to have a sense of. Some people say, "Oh, what's wrong with wanting cake? What's wrong with?" slightly misses the point. Nothing wrong with it. So don't get into, I shouldn't have things. Because if you're not careful, you mistake this reflection for aversion. And so I've seen this with people where you start to get high and mighty about things. That's just craving. You start to sort of get quite hard with this. If you're not careful, you get it mixed up with aversion, that you feel aversion for having a house or a car or a wife or a children and so on. What it's saying is a house, a wife, a car, a career, that is not going to do what you want it to do. That is what Buddhism is really saying. It's saying, yeah, fine, but you're trying to make those things meet something that it won't fulfill. Like there's nothing wrong with wanting to eat if you're hungry. But if you're if you're comfort eating because you're lonely or bored or you don't feel you've got any meaning in your life, however much you eat will not solve that question. So what the issue is for wanting is that we look to things for something they can't give us. I mean, this is classic, isn't it, in a sexual relationship. It's very easy to look to your partner, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, wife, husband, whoever it is. You want from them something that they can't give. You want them to love you all the time. You want them to be wonderful company all the time. You can get that. It's not that you just want the pleasure and the company. You can sort of want them to sort of make your life complete and whole. My own belief is if you do that, the more you do that, the more you're going to get into trouble, because people aren't there to make your life whole and you're not there to make their life whole. But do you see how that's a different level than saying what's the issue about sexual relationship? There isn't an issue. Do you see what I mean? That we're trying to get out of things, something that those things can't give us. Yeah. That's a way of thinking about it. Anyway, I'm so aware when I talk about these things that I can think of other things I might say that almost contradict it, but that would be one way of answering that.
Maybe something about the grasping. Damien is asking about the grasping of the pursuit of knowledge and understanding, or having ambition to better know the world, and just kind of what is that grasp? I think the question is that grasping okay? Is that another type of kind of...
Yeah, it's a bit similar question, isn't it? I mean, one of the things I was going to say about that, one of the things you could say is that I'd like to bring back being pretentious, just to be a bit outrageous. I'd like to bring back the value of being pretentious. When I was young, that was something people did, and I did. I remember when I was young, I remember somebody talking about Beethoven. I remember thinking, I wish I could talk about Beethoven. It sounds like so kind of expensive and sort of arty. I remember, even those names, Picasso, Braque, I don't know, Jane Austen, fancied reading Jane Austen novels. And, I remember being pretentious like that, really rather wanting to be able to name drop. But actually what that helped me do is actually listen to Beethoven eventually and read Jane Austen and, look at Titian and so on. I'd like to see people more concerned to educate themselves in beauty. It's a slightly controversial area because so many different views about that. But I think that desire for knowledge, to learn is really crucial. I wouldn't problematize that at all. And yes, eventually you'll have to let go of that. Even things like the pursuit of art and knowledge can become an end in itself. I've met people who are very cultured, and wonderfully cultured and much better read and much more cultured than I am, who I feel that there's something dead about it. There's something, it's like it's become an end in itself, and it's become kind of, it's like got frost on it. It sort of becomes a kind of stale grandeur. I've met some people like that. Most of us, that's not an issue. But I think the desire to learn, for me, that's crucial. I really feel much happier in my life if I feel I'm learning. So yeah, I don't think that's a problem until it becomes an end in itself, until being arty or knowledgeable or philosophical becomes your way of being you. And look at me, I'm arty or cultural and so on. which is just unhelpful. But what I see more is a kind of reverse snobbery, where people are snobbish about the fact that they don't do those things. I remember in the community I used to live, I was listening to Mozart a lot, and some of the people I was living with had quite a strong reverse snobbery. So it was positively dangerous to mention the fact that I'm enjoying Mozart. They'd all be like, "Oh God, what a snob!" But actually, I was genuinely enjoying it. You can have a sort of reverse snobbery. That's, in my experience of people, perhaps particularly younger people, I'm not sure, it's got a reverse snobbery. I want to learn more and more. I want to read good stuff. I want to learn. And the Buddhist path is that exemplified, I think. And yes, at a certain point, it starts to become an end in itself. It starts to be another way of shoring up our fragile sense of ourselves, and that needs to be let go of.
Oliver is wondering what the Buddhist explanation of addiction is and how to overcome it.
Addiction, yes.
Being a form of extreme form of craving.
Yes, I think this is a whole other subject that it would be good to look at, is this question of addiction. It's quite a big area to go into. I'm nervous of addiction being used too broadly as a term. You get addicted to drugs, to alcohol. Some people start to say people. I remember somebody comparing and saying that they were addicted to sugar, and it was as bad as heroin. I personally found that a bit disgraceful. Heroin is massively destructive. So I'm a bit nervous of stretching the term to start saying that all craving is basically addiction. There is such a thing as addiction, and it's different to eating too many cakes, or it's different to having one too many. I've seen people, particularly alcoholic addiction to alcohol. I've seen it destroy people's lives, and I've seen it destroy the lives of those around them. I mean, really destroy. I mean, some of the most awful stories I've heard, people's life stories, have been to do with addiction. All you could say, I suppose, is that all pleasure is addictive. As soon as you have pleasure, I mean, a Buddhist kind of take on pleasure, you could say, or one way of thinking about Buddhism and pleasure and what it says about pleasure, is that as soon as you have pleasure, you want to repeat it. And whether that's the pleasure of sex, whether it's the pleasure of, I don't know, being somebody laughing at your jokes, the pleasure of someone agreeing with you, the pleasure of gossiping, the pleasure of getting together and feeling high and mighty about something and agreeing on that. As soon as you do that, you want to do it more, don't you? As soon as you have some nice food, you want to eat more of it. And Yanavach's sister, Mita, I don't know whether you're watching, Mita, she made this lovely shrikand for us. I especially saved it because I was on my fast day yesterday. And it's just wonderful. As soon as you have a spoonful of it, you just want to eat more and more of it. And I did, I'm afraid, eat more and more of it. Luckily, she made us a lot. It's very kind of her. As soon as you have pleasure, you know it's pleasure because you want to repeat it. And the more you try and repeat pleasure, the less pleasure you get. You know that experience when you have something that's really pleasurable and you actually start eating it quicker because it's so pleasurable. And then you start thinking, is there going to be any more? And as soon as you're doing that, you're not actually attending to the pleasure you got just now. So the more you want pleasure, the less actual pleasure you get, which feeds its addictive tendency. You have to keep upping the ante. That's why people get into all sorts of weird and wonderful things, because they need to up the ante to get the same amount of pleasure. Because you actually get, you can't keep on having pleasure. You get diminishing returns, don't you? And then the Buddhist take on pain is you got pain because as soon as you've got pain, you want to get rid of it. And those attitudes to pleasure and pain are hardwired. As soon as you have pleasure, you want to repeat it. As soon as you have pain, you want to get rid of it. Our strategies for repeating pleasures often vitiate pleasure. We often get less pleasure because of it. Think of that weekend where you try and read the paper, have a croissant, try and cram in as much pleasure to the weekend as you can. What you end up with is a sort of pain. What you end up with is a kind of anxiety of trying to get pleasure. And you get less and less pleasure in that state. And And then as soon as you've got discomfort, you try and get rid of it. And your strategies for trying to get rid of discomfort often make it worse. So do you see how a Buddhist approach to life is saying, you see that these are really deep, hardwired issues. You want more pleasure, you get less pleasure because of that. And you'll get into this addictive cycle. If you're trying to get rid of pain, you're very likely to cause pain for yourself and others. So our deep instincts, we're trying to educate them to become wiser. At least that's from a day-to-day perspective. Yeah, a bit of a broad answer, but I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
So there's a couple of questions about this theme of reality. So, a very short one. Ben asks what you mean when you say metaphysical.
Good question, Ben. Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Do you want to just?
Yes. What do I mean when I say metaphysical? They're really grand, aren't they? These words. Even reality is a grand word, I find. There's no Buddhist equivalent, interestingly, to that word reality. There isn't one. There isn't a Buddhist word for it. I'm almost certain that there's not a Buddhist word that would translate as metaphysical. I believe it wasn't it to do with, I don't know much about Greek philosophy, but I think it was originally just a book after physics. There was physics, and then the next book was metaphysics. That's what I'm told. Anyway. I seem to remember that. I don't know what you're like, but I learn lots of stuff and then quickly forget it all. So what do I mean when I mean I mean what is? It's a really good question. So often the best questions are the simplest ones. I mean, what's really going on? I just mean what's really going on. What's really going on? Not what do I think is going on, not how I interpret what's going on. And as I said, a lot of us say, oh, my experience was this. What we really mean is this is how I interpret my experience. Sanjay criticizes me and I say, oh, well, my experience is that you don't like me. No, that's your interpretation of your experience. Yeah. So not what you think about your experience, not your interpretation of experience, not your assumptions, theories, doctrines, metaphors, etc., etc. What actually is going on? Yeah. So, for instance, here we are in this room in the London Buddhist Centre. What's actually going on now? I'm talking to a tripod with a bit of plastic on the top of it with a little white light, and I can see Sanjay behind me with these two spotlights. And I can hear the sound of the traffic. Can I? Oh, yeah, there you go. Bit of sound of traffic. But when you say I hear the sound of traffic, there's no such thing as, that's not traffic, is it, that I can hear? What is it? Because traffic is an English word. It's to do with a word that human beings give to a certain sort of noise, to do with road vehicles. But I can't hear traffic, can I? So the end of I can hear kind of rumbly sound, but rumbling is an English word, a universal abstraction. And then you say, okay, let's say it's sound. So I can hear sound, but sound is just a word. So what is it? Then I think, well, it's out there. I can hear it out there. But out there is a category. In what sense is the sound out there? Like as I'm talking to you now, I can't remember your name again. Ben, wasn't it? Yeah. As I talk to you now, Ben, you're hearing my voice. Is my voice inside or outside? I know it's coming from the speaker and the computer. Is it out there or not? And as I look at the lens, are you, as it were, the plastic thing I'm looking at least, is that out there or not? When I see it, it's in my mind. Where is an out there? Yeah. So do you see what I'm trying to get at by metaphysics? So what is going on? As the old song says, what's it all about, Alfie? What's actually going on? Something's going on. I'm speaking. It's all really rather mysterious. But we've got all these words: inside, outside, traffic, sound, these lights, Sanjay. But when you start to look at them a bit more, you don't really, they're all mostly just words and categories. And so what's really going on? So when I say metaphysical, I mean what's really going on, not what I interpret as going on, not what I say is going on, not what I think about it, not what I name it. What's really going on? Yeah? Something more like that. That's inadequate, but it'll have to do for now. Jan of Archer might talk more about that tomorrow night, because he'll be talking about seeing through the self.
So, like that. So, talking before about how things aren't inherently bad.
No.
Things are inherently bad. And Clara is wondering about how that relates to things like racism and these kind of issues that seem kind of very real.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Clara. That actually is interesting that you should bring that up, because that was, as I was saying it, I could feel another part of me thinking, but hang on, for instance, racism, any kind of hateful prejudice. I spoke about this the other night. Did you see how dangerous it is to take up a wisdom perspective without ethics and meditation? Do you see? Because before you know it, you're making some grand statement that things aren't inherently problematic. Meanwhile, you see, you see terrible things, unspeakable, horrible things. I was interviewing a poet recently whose great grandfather, his whole family had been murdered in a pogrom. Anti-Semitic hatred and murder. I won't repeat what actually happened, but unspeakable human malevolence. So do you see how, if you're not careful, a wisdom perspective of that things aren't intrinsically problematic seems disgraceful in that, yeah? So it's a wisdom perspective. So it's based on ethics and meditation. It's not mixing those levels, yeah? But what it's trying to get at, and this is, I don't know, it's almost impossible to communicate this, that there's some wholly other way of experiencing ourselves and the world, in which, I've been very, very fortunate so far. I've had no violence done to me. I've had my own pain and everything like everybody else. I've been very, very fortunate in that way. And many of us are very, very fortunate in that way. We're incredibly fortunate. Most of us are now. The streets are much, much less dangerous than they were 100 years ago. If you were being in Victorian England and walking the streets tonight, it would be a very, very dangerous place, much more dangerous than it is now. So all of us are very, very lucky. But so I've never had that. But one thing I can talk about from my own experience is the fear of death, of course. So what this wisdom perspective is saying is that even death, the thing we fear most, from the deepest wisdom perspective, is not a problem. We celebrate a Buddhist festival called Parinirvana, which is often talked about as about the death of the Buddha. Actually, Parinirvana means enlightenment without remainder. So it just means, the remainder just means a body. So the Buddha saw through death itself at enlightenment. So his death, his physical death, was neither here nor there for him. He'd already let go of any fear of death before that. So dying had no threat to him. It was no problem. Now, I can't imagine that, frankly. But that is the Buddhist, that is how Buddhists, that is what Buddhist wisdom is getting at. That there is a way of being in the world, there is a consciousness in which death itself isn't a problem. That, in other words, there's a perspective on life that is so vast that death, I don't know, it's not that it disappears, it's part of something bigger. Yeah, I'm stumbling over my words because we're touching into the most profound. But yes, that is definitely the Buddhist vision. But you see how we mustn't get it mixed up with, one of the dangers of Buddhism in the West. I spoke about this recently. The kind of quietism, the kind of passiveness, where Buddhists are sort of nice, quiet people who do no harm and are rather sweet. Actually, even that would be pretty good if more Buddhists were like that. But Buddhists want to change the world and change the self. You can't really do one without the other. So it's not just, turning a blind eye to racism or turning a blind eye to homophobia or anything else. It's trying to look hatred squarely in the face and say, the Buddha said very, very clearly, hatred is never overcome by hatred. So Buddhism's attitude to those things is very challenging. But yeah, let's not mix up levels. I think that's one of the reasons that was in the back of my mind. So thank you for bringing it to the fore. Yeah, yeah.
Marcia says, asks, how do we stay in tune with reality?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So, how do we stay in tune with the reality? Well, I'll just tell you a story. I think, the person I've felt that's most in tune with reality that I've ever met is Bantey, Angulation, the founder of the movement, of this Orderin movement. Somebody, this is many years ago, he's died, he's dead now, but many years ago, somebody rushed up to him and said, "Oh, Bantey." Bantey just means reverent teacher. It's a term of respect. He said, "Oh, Bantey, I wish I was like you. I just want to be like you. How do I be like you?" And it's very interesting because you could imagine that he would say, you need to meditate every day, you need to practice kindness, you need to be compassionate, you need to be wise, you need to be a vegetarian. You could imagine all sorts of things in which he could say, how you be like me. What he actually said, and this is to a friend of mine, he said, reflect on everything that happens to you. Yeah, reflect on everything that happens to you. In other words, if you want to make progress towards wisdom, reflect on everything that happens to you. Actually get interested in what happens to you and your responses to it. Why did I act like that? Why am I taking that so personally? Why have I got so caught up with this? Reflect on what happens to you. Look around and observe. A lot of wisdom, I think, is to do with, it sounds trivial, but it's to do with looking. Actually just looking at what's there. Do you remember that's, one of the, I know COVID has been terrible and we're still in this time of uncertainty, but did you experience that spring seemed to be more beautiful this year? I don't know, it's probably a romantic imagination I've got, but you could hear bird song in London like you could never hear before. You could hear, it seemed greener than usual. We had the wonderful sunshine. And I've forgotten why I'm saying this. What was I saying? I've got so lost in my description of screaming. I can't remember where I started. Can you remember, anyone in the chat box remember where I started? Normally when I'm doing a live class, somebody says, "Oh, you were saying this." In tune with reality. That's right. And I was talking about looking. So you just look, and already spring, that's gone. We're in summer, and the green is slightly more tarnished, and things are changing again. You just keep looking. You look at yourself. You look at others. You look at them with kindly eyes. You try to understand. You don't rush to judgment, to opinion. I become really aversive to opinion, particularly ones I don't agree with. You just look at things more. But yes, reflect on everything that happened. Add to that, and start meditating if you're not meditating. That's the royal road to wisdom. At least that's one way. There's lots of royal roads to wisdom, but one of them very much, unless you're meditating every day, you've not got much of a chance of being in touch with reality, because meditation is about creating awareness. And unless you're, as it were, in that greenhouse of your meditation, creating awareness, Bante Sangharakshita once said that your daily meditation was like a daily solitary retreat. All of us need a daily solitary retreat. Unless you're doing that, the world is going to be too much with you. You'll be blown around too much by your own clinging and grasping and your own aversion. So that we better finish there, or start to finish there, because we better wind up. So in a moment, we'll finish the evening by reciting the transference of merit and self-surrender. We always do that because we really want to be saying that whatever anyone's getting from this, what I'm getting from it, what you're getting from it, I hope you've got something from this evening that's going to be for the benefit of everyone, Buddhist or not, everyone you want to benefit. But before that, I do want to ask if you can to give. If you're on this course, we're asking you if you can to give us £50 to be on the course if you can. We really, there's no nicer way of dressing up, but we really need money. The centre is losing, we reckon we're losing £10,000 a month at the moment in lost income. That's, I must admit, slightly worried me whilst we're on grasping and aversion and so on, but that has slightly worried me. It's slightly worried. I think it's not worrying so much for me, but it's worrying for the centre. For instance, I remember I came along to the Buddhist Centre when I was 25 and I was in a mess. Hard to believe now. That was a joke. When I came along, I was in a real mess. I was at art school. I was at Goldsmiths Art School. I was there with Damien Hirst and Sarah Lucas. Are you watching, Sarah or Damien? I was the one that wasn't successful, one of the ones that wasn't successful. But I was a mess. My life was all over the place. And actually, I'm making that sound funny, but it didn't feel funny. I remember having suicidal thoughts a lot and so on. I was very prone to depression. I was a mess. And what I discovered when I came to the London Buddhist Centre I didn't discover people who were trying to clear up the mess and talk down to me and pontificate to me. What I experienced when I came to the London Buddhist Centre is being taken seriously. I experienced friendship and I experienced a vision of life. I discovered a vision of life. And I pretty much have never looked back from that. I've been coming along to the Buddhist Centre and living in it for the last 33 years, but I've been coming to the Buddhist Centre since then. It's given me a vision of life. And I know that it's, for many, many people, that's what it's done and is doing. I've met so many people who have told me that Buddhism, the meditation, mindfulness, coming along to the centre, somebody wrote to me just recently saying, it's actually the first time I've experienced hope in this whole COVID crisis. It's the first time I've experienced hope. So I want that message. I want the Buddha's wisdom to reach as many people as possible. I don't know how many people got tonight, about 100, something like that. I'd like us to be talking to 1,000 people, 10,000 people. I'd like us to be teaching meditation for 20,000 people next year. I'd like more and more people to be having a daily solitary retreat where they're developing awareness. So they're not acting out of greed and hatred and delusion as much as they can. We're all messed up with greed, hatred, and delusion. You've got it, I've got it. Let's all work towards being the solution of greed, hatred, and delusion. Meditation, mindfulness, Buddhism is a vision to do that, a path and a vision. But for that to be there, you need support. You need the centre. You need people like me who are all volunteers. Sanjay works for government. He's in a good job, but he's coming down just to volunteer tonight on our Friday night, just to sit with me for 2 hours, trying not to look like he's heard it before, and doing fairly well. He's just giving his time. I'm giving my time. Yeah, we want to get the vision of Buddhism out there. I think the world really needs it. I know the world needs it. I keep on hearing from people. So Sandra's going to put a link in the chat box. So if you can give, that's great. And probably all of you can give something. So just sort of give something. Otherwise, it's a bit like Buddhist TV. And you're just sort of, oh, that was good. I'll now go on to, Legally Blonde, something like that on Netflix. It's actually quite good, Legally Blonde. It's another matter. But yeah, do give. If you're on the course, what we're recommending for the course is that you give £50. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so, and probably I'd do it soon. Otherwise, you know what it's like. We all have good intentions and then we forget about it. Natural enough. Give us some money, and then we can keep getting this out there. Yeah, we can keep doing that. But let's finish by reciting the transference of merit and self-surrender in call and response. So I'll do the call and you respond. Some of you you'll have your flatmate next door, or your partner next door, or your father or your mother, but see if you can just, even if you can't say it out loud, see if you can say it in your mind. And don't worry too much about the words. All it's saying is, look, I want whatever good I've got in my life, whatever good fortune I have, I want everyone to have that. I want everyone to benefit as much as I'm benefiting. Yeah. So let's do that in call and response, and we'll finish with that. So see if you can say after me. May the merit gained in my acting thus go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. My personality throughout my existences. My possessions. And my merit in all three ways. I give up without regard to myself. For the benefit of all beings. Just as the earth and other elements are serviceable in many ways to the infinite number of beings inhabiting limitless space. So may I become that which maintains all beings, situated throughout space, so long as all have not attained to peace. Good, thank you. So I hope you're all well. Do tune in tomorrow for Untitled tomorrow evening. Tomorrow morning we'll be meditating again. So let's carry on this road to full potential together. Anyway, good night from me. See you soon.